Welcome, I'm Giulia.
And I am Marta.
And this is LateMode, a podcast in search of the zeitgeist. Through a series of conversations, we explore the fragmented and hyper-connected modes of our current times. For this episode, I found myself in Brussels, where I had the pleasure of meeting the talented and dedicated filmmaker Django Schrevens Da Silva, who I invited to have a chat with me. With a background in acting, Django has worked on a variety of film projects, including The Fifth Season and The Fortress, while he recently completed his first feature film, 11-11-18, which we will discuss in this conversation. In this chat, Django shared his ideas on screenwriting, directing, and the medium of film, which he describes as a connection and bridge to the spiritual world. We bounce between reality, the dream of fiction, as well as the afterlife to attempt to find out how it all relates to empathy. Throughout the conversation, we covered many themes, but it becomes clear that this conversation is not just about the world of filmmaking, but about human experience, our inner world, and the power of the creative process to inspire and encourage us all. I hope you enjoy it.
So now it's really starting.
Yeah. I actually wanted to jump straight into a question that I already had in mind since last night when we were at dinner.
Okay, yeah.
I remember you mentioned that filmmaking for you is a duty.
Yeah.
And I was really curious to ask you already what do you mean by that, but I thought I'll save it for today.
Okay, yeah.
So maybe you can elaborate a little bit on
the duty of filmmaking. Yeah, well, it's funny because I started getting interested by filmmaking was with the Lord of the Rings in 2001 when it was screened in the cinemas, and it was the first one. And I remember that movie sort of put the base of spiritual, cultural, mythological, political ideas that I wouldn't have at the time. I was 6 years old, and suddenly I would see a complete, organic, cohesive world before my eyes in the cinema room. And that was the first time that I really clicked that the world could be so complex and so...
You were 6 years old.
Yeah. And before that, I remember I always been dreaming a lot, so I was daydreaming all the time. Every time I could get a chance to daydream, I would do it. So spending a lot of time in my mind. And I remember that watching The Lord of the Rings sort of changed quite everything for me. And then after that, I started, I was very lucky because Peter Jackson, the director of the film, released a whole bunch of DVDs with a lot of behind-of-the-scenes content. And it was huge because he would share the whole process from the idea, the screenwriting, to the very end of post-production and distribution of the film. So that was sort of my film school, and I remember being really struck by the fact that it was such a labor of love. You know, everybody on that picture was working so hard for the sake of it and not even for the money or fame or anything. It was really about this huge collective achievement based on passion. And that really got me really hard because then I thought that for me, that's always what filmmaking has been about. It's about this huge commitment and passion, and you give your whole... and the collective experience, for sure. So therefore, when I watched those films and behind-the-scenes DVDs, I was just convinced that I would do that somehow. And
already, when you were 6 or 7 years
I was
old.
6 or 7, and I was like, okay,
wow.
I need to do that. And this is serious work, but this is commitment. And I was really sure of it, and I didn't understand much about anything in the world, but that I was sure of. So that was probably my first certainty. I don't have a lot of certainties, but that was one of them, you know. So yeah, and then with the years, I was writing a lot about a lot of topics and about the spirits, about a lot of different things, and I always felt that, you know, how when I write a movie or when I start a project, it always comes with a picture in my mind. So I need a click. I need a picture that comes and that I believe does not come from me. It just comes, and it's a very clear picture of a scene. Usually there's a bit of sound attached to it and a bit of emotion, and then, okay, I have the picture, and then I will build the whole movie on that picture. And sometimes it's a picture from the end of the movie, from the beginning, from the middle. It doesn't matter. It just comes sort of, I download it.
And so if it doesn't come from you, where does it come from?
Yeah, but that's the point, isn't it? The thing is, all those ideas are always connected to some kind of communication, or I would say connection between what I believe is the spiritual world and the physical world. And it's always about, let's see, the first idea I had like that was about a young teenager who was, he had a girlfriend, and the girlfriend dies. And he gets really angry about it and sort of becomes the arch enemy of humanity. So he's really sort of getting so upset by the fact that his girlfriend died. And the thing is, his girlfriend was the sort of a prophet. I always like to start with a very strong, with a ever strong prophetic character, and it can be the main character, but it's not always. And in that case, it was the girlfriend of that character, and it was very autobiographical story also. And so he gets so upset about humanity that he wants to destroy everything. And then the whole story is about him on Earth trying to do actually the wrong thing, and her on the spiritual world trying to communicate with him, trying to find a way to communicate with him and tell him that she's not dead, she's just on another level of experience of life. So it's it's always sort of this journey to make contact, to sort of share ideas or feelings with the spiritual world, with the dead. But it's not only about the dead people, it's really about all the consciousness that may exist, that we cannot witness with our own eyes.
Yeah, because when I think of duty, for example, as you said, duty, right? It's duty towards who that you feel. Is it like here or there,
well,
or is it a combination of the two?
I think it's a combination of the two. Honestly, if it wasn't for the spirit world and stuff like that, I don't think I would approach things the way I do. Meaning, I think I would just write, and I don't think I would direct movies if it wasn't for that duty. And let me explain myself. The thing is, if I just wanted to write about, random topics or just topics of my daily life or anything I'm interested in, I would just write, and I would not have the need to direct it, to actually bring it to the screen and show it to people. But because I have this sort of duty to show about the bridge, it's only about the bridge. My whole conception of filmmaking is about building a bridge between the spiritual and the physical world, and that's really about sharing some stuff from what I believe to be the afterlife. But I don't really like that word. So, but anyway, afterlife and what we experience here.
And so, do you see the medium of film as this bridge?
Yeah, totally. At least one of them. But the thing with movies is that when you are in a cinema room and you are with a lot of people, it's a collective experience, of course. But then you sort of forget the outside world for an hour and a half or 2 hours and a half, and you sort of, if the movie is well made and is genuine, you really sort of access to another world within the screen. The screen just, and the sound and the image just brings you to another dimension. And so for me, it's a very nice way to sort of jump into it with those pictures, because yeah.
I wonder if you always get taken to another dimension, though, because film has this, as photography has this really very realistic.
Yeah.
Well, the medium itself, it is that it's like playing with the very concept of reality, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you try in your film making to explore how this still being real, it can take you somewhere else, perhaps onto those like more subconscious and spiritual realm.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think the sound is very important to bring you in another place. I mean, and I've seen it with the last picture I finished, the feature film, my first feature film, and we were really stuck in post production because we felt that we needed to tell that story through sound mostly, and actually the images, the pictures were there to sort of back up the sound in a way. So that took us a long time to sort of figure out. So yeah, I think the combination between pictures and sound is something, I don't know. For me, it's almost a mystery, you know, how, or at least how I get stuck into a picture or an image or a dream. You know, it's a living dream. For me, a movie is really a living dream. But that's how I approach it, and that's really connected with the Lord of the Rings, because that's obviously a living dream. You know, there's nothing realistic to it in terms of our own society, but of course there are themes that just go through and are universal, I guess. But,
and you just mentioned your feature film, which is called 11/11/18.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Good, I got it right.
Yeah, you got it.
Just going through like all of your filmography last night, just like trying to be as informed as possible. Yeah. But actually, I haven't watched the film as of now. I really would like to. But I know that it's set within the theme of war. So it's the last day of First World War. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I wanted to ask you straight away, like, why this background of war? If you think that the background of war enables this, precisely what you're talking about, this dreaming or this being transported somewhere else.
Yeah, but that's an interesting question, because most of my films, or most of my ideas, are usually set up on some kind of conflict or big war, because I really believe that when you are in touch with death like that, then suddenly there's a clear bridge that can be built up between the mortal and let's say the immortal realm. Because so the whole point with the 11/11/18 movie is that you got these soldiers that are living in the trench. This supposedly the last day of the war, and then they tragically die on the last day of war. And then so the whole point of the movie is showing that on the afterlife they actually get stuck in that trench, and it's not because they're dead, that it just, you know, they're just done with it. It sort of stays with them, and they have to deal and they have to solve it. It's almost as an equation or a problem that still needs to be solved before they can go somewhere else, somewhere more peaceful. So for me, that's why war and death is always interesting, because it just allows that straight connection between the two worlds. And I guess it's a bit like also with when you speak about disease or whatever. I mean, every time death is around in the topics or whatever, it feels deeper, but also a bit more tricky to talk about the spiritual world. But that's what I really like, is when it's always around there, and you need to find a way to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking as you were talking actually about where does reality sort of like real and when there's for example fiction begin. Also, as you were talking to me last night about your most recent, or what you're actually working on right now, your project with Scouts.
With the Scouts,
which I thought it was really cute somehow. And you said that it's a docu film, docu fiction. Yeah. And how do you see this, right? Like this, when you bring in the fiction to something that is real, does it make it like, do you use fiction as this way of making it more truthful? Because in that you can incorporate precisely what you're saying, these elements of dreaming and unconscious. And
I guess so. I mean, for me, it's very hard. I don't think I actually can make something that is straightforward reality. I don't know, a social movie that we just talk about issues like social issues, whatever.
Why not?
Maybe because of that imagination and dream component that for me is an absolute need. I cannot think if there's not a dimension about dreaming or imagination or whatever. It's just, for me, that is really how I think, you know. And it doesn't mean I don't like to deal with real issues in the daily life, but the reason of why I'm doing what I'm doing is because I want to access to that dimension. And so I don't mind doing like very straightforward daily stuff if it's to access some, I don't know, more invisible dimensions. So for me, it's really that's my fuel, you know. That's how I that's why I get up in the morning, you know. And actually, it's funny because I'm a big sleeper, and you know, I'm a big sleeper, and I really feel like I started to wake up early and being, you know, able to wake up because I wanted to dream bigger during the day than I do during the night. So that was the whole thing, is when I managed to dream big in the day, then got me the strength to wake up in the morning, because otherwise I could just keep like dreaming, you know, all the time. It's not a problem. So
and you feel that these awake hours are working out? Like, are you managing to bring more dream into your awakened time?
Yeah, actually it's quite, I still feel like it's the beginning, because there's so many things I don't know, I want to do, and just want to say it's always collective, you know. It's funny also because I have my personal projects and so on, but I don't have many projects that I write or direct alone. So usually I'm always surrounded by amazing people that sort of, we share part of that dream, and then everybody takes a piece of the cake, and then we just make this collective dream together. So yeah, so my daily life is getting closer and closer to that big dream I want to reach. It's a big struggle, because it's not easy for me to deal with all the daily aspects of life, but I'm starting to get better at it, and I'm starting to enjoy them more and more and more. So yeah, I'm slowly getting there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this, if you want to take the example of the Scout film that you were... But I loved how you were telling me that, of course, this comes from a very personal experience of you being a Scout, and then it's also this, well, in a way, also relating to duty again, of this, like maintaining this legacy, because the same Scouts... Well, maybe you should tell better the story.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, probably that movie is my most, how do I say, realistic movie of all my projects yet. But yeah, so I've been a chief for 4 years, and the funny thing is that the chiefs that are now, they used to be my scouts, so I used to be their chief. And so that's the whole point about this picture, is to sort of it's really about legacy. And what I love about scouting world is that it's all free, so you never get paid for it. It's not a job, you know. It's a passion, and it's a dedication that you choose to do with kids and teenagers, and you just want to give the best of yourself, and hoping that when they'll be in your place, they just give the best to the new generation. So it's really about this very free and very gentle and very, very, with a big heart legacy. And that's what we wanted to show in the movie also, because we really aware with the fact that making that film is going to be very different than usual, because usually you don't have cameras and you don't have big sets and big costumes and a lot of people on the camp. But we really hope and really believe that that experience is going to be a good impulse for the kids, for the teenagers, and when they're going to be chiefs themselves, we hope they're just gonna share their passion with the younger, you know.
Yeah.
And,
I think it's really interesting somehow how, you know, today we're discussing a topic left by someone else, which is empathy, and this woman Constanza who left the topic, she mentioned it in relation to her project, which she does also as a grassroots project that, you know, nobody gets paid, but it's like these groups all over Europe actually that get together and they just talk. So they're called conversas, these like meeting groups that are held in different places, and really talking about how, you know, what is the point of these activities or these projects, which then always end up actually been lifelong projects, you know?
Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah, and then I think that the point of these projects is legacy, is perhaps creating empathy.
Yeah.
Like, or
Totally. Yeah.
facilitating.
Yeah.
And do you see this also in general as something that you try to achieve with many of the things that you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because when you write, and especially screenplays, I don't know about novels and poetry, so I wouldn't speak about it. But about screenplays, it's only about empathy because you try to develop a character that has a goal, and you just show how she or he is gonna manage to reach that goal, and what are the obstacles that along the way. So it's only about understanding the reason why somebody does what they do, and why and how, and trying to sort of understand the deep roots of somebody else, and how they work, and the inner life of somebody, whether it's spiritual or psychological or moral, but there's always an inner life and inner fuel to somebody, I guess. Screenwriting is only about that. You always write about, and also I would say it's really only about that, because when you write about a character that you're not, I mean, now I'm working on a film, and for example, there's one character, she's a woman, and obviously I'm not one, but then through empathy, I would just try to feel or think like she might do it.
How? Like, how do you do that?
Well, so the thing is, I always try to put themes that I share myself within those characters. So I always try to build characters upon some aspects of what I believe, or of what I feel, or how I think, and I always try to give it to them as a main building block. And then I would just expand from that block, and then I would, do some research, and then talk with people that maybe have a reality that is closer to the character. But I always try to build a character really upon a dimension of myself, because otherwise I fail to make it speak.
Yeah.
But then eventually the character ends up being very different than me, because of course it got all these different flaws, or the same flaws, or different aspects. But the core is usually we share one.
It's almost how it happens, right? In our relationships to one another.
Totally, yeah.
That you always have one side that you share with someone,
Yeah.
that we always have something in common, and then obviously these divergent parts.
Yeah.
But actually, I think it's interesting to talk to you about empathy specifically, because you also occupy a lot of different, let's say, we would call them modes. So you're like acting, writing, and directing.
Yeah.
Which are all, of course, related, but also all different ways of being empathic to
that's true.
others,
yeah,
right?
That's true. Yeah, it's very true.
How would you see those differing and bridging also?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I would say the actor or the acting is really about emotional. So your empathy is built on emotion, because you really sort of need to feel what the other character feels. So the character you need to play, to portray, whether it's for dubbing or whether it's of a play or in a film, there's a character that is sort of written down, and you need to feel enough for him, for her, in order to kind of portray him or her. And so I would say the actor is really the emotional part. And then the director is sort of the global part, because as a director, you sort of need to understand the job of everybody else, and to understand it in a very deep way, and to understand the people you're working with. Because the director piece is a very interesting one, because you are very central to the filmmaking process. But on the other hand, you are at the service of everybody, because you need to help everybody with what they have to do. For example, when, if there's a question about costumes, then I would, as a director, I would just say, well, I have this intuition about it, and I have this feeling about it. And then because I share that, the other person can actually work on it and give everything to make my intuition or whatever an actual piece of beautiful costume and something meaningful. So it's always, you need to understand very well the people you're working with, and of course have a lot of empathy for them, because they all have very different realities also when you're on a film set, and even throughout the whole production. I mean, the people working with sound have certain needs at a certain time, and the people, for example, the actors would have a totally different need at totally different times. So it's really about trying to feel and to understand. It's really about understanding the needs of everybody and trying to give your best to fulfill it. So that would be the director part, and then the screenwriter part it's even on another level, because like we said a bit about dreaming. I mean, if the actor is the emotional part and the director is the global part, I'd say that the screenwriter is the very mental part in a way. So what the screenwriter will do is set up the structure for empathy. So it would build up the narrative in a way that the audience would have empathy for that world, for the characters, for their goals. So he's really the architect in a way, I would say, of empathy. So the three combined. It's funny because when I work, I don't know if I'm in a certain mode or another, because for me it's all mixed up now. It's one big mess.
Even when you're acting?
Yeah. I guess I would be more on the emotional part, but then I would always have a look on how it's written and and how it's directed, because I don't know, I just can't help it. So I just look at it and I try to understand also the intention of one dialogue or the intention of one scene, and not just go straight to it and as an actor and just try to portray the lines or the role. We just try to look behind it and see what's the meaning of it, and
yeah. And just going back a little to what you were saying about screenwriting as being more this architect of empathy, and I wanted to relate it to your feature film. How does the setting of war, as we were discussing, in your idea create more empathy, for example? Or was it ever thought in these terms?
Well, it was, because that movie is a bit special, I'd say, in the way that so the story is about a German aviator during the First World War that sort of crashes into a Belgian/French trench. So the whole story is about that German pilot that sort of needs to shut up and don't reveal his identity to the trench, to his enemies, and try to make his way out of the trench. But as I said earlier, they're all gonna die, and then they sort of stuck in the afterworld together. So the whole journey of that character is like how his enemies will become eventually, I wouldn't say his friends, but at least he will start to understand them and respect them, and for what they are, which is actually spirits in that world, because they're not in the physical world anymore. So therefore, all what they've been, whether it's cultural or or political or whatever, then it's all starts to fade away and leave place for something else, which is in the story sort of pure essence of, okay, what am I and what are you? And actually, we're not so different after all. So yeah, that movie is actually a lot about empathy, which is funny. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about spirit and spirituality, and you can tell me if you also don't feel comfortable about, I know that one spirituality is quite a personal and private realm.
Yeah,
at times.
Yeah, at times, yeah.
But also last night when we were having dinner, we discovered that we had something in common.
Yeah, we do.
Straight away.
Yeah, we do.
I was doing research on Spiritism, and you mentioned that you yourself are a spiritist, which is, well, maybe you should tell me what it is for you. So
I'll say it right away. So it's funny because I would say my heart is in Catholic Church, but my mind, my conception of the afterworld and is in Spiritism. Mm-hmm. So I really feel in between, and that's because of life experience. I mean, because of what I've been through, then I found a real community in Catholic Church that really touched my heart. But then because of where I come from, my mother is a spiritist herself and has experienced a certain amount of things when I was a kid. And so then that Spiritism is a tricky thing, because it's the bridge between religion, philosophy, and sort of science. At least that's how it's described, but it's always hard to sort of put the right words to it, I guess, for people who are not introduced. For me, it's a glimpse of the future. That's really how I say it. And actually, it's funny because every time I think about sci-fi idea, science fiction movie, whatever, what I do, my mechanism is always the same, is I take all the Spiritism concepts of the afterworld and I put it into science fiction. So I present it to the audience as science fiction.
Can you give an example?
So for example, I'm writing a screenplay that is about a young woman, police officer, that gets killed in very mysterious conditions, and she wakes up in that kind of afterlife. And we never speak in terms of religion or moral terms. So she just goes in this new city, very white city, where people are trying to heal her, and they discover that she needs to deal with something. She needs to discover herself how she was murdered, because otherwise she cannot go to the other cities and to the new life. So all that spiritual world is really about, I present it as a sci-fi, as a place beyond space and time that you can actually keep working and living and
but
progressing.
That's really a concept that is quite at the base of Spiritism, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you do not deal correctly, let's say, or if you cannot deal properly with certain issues and sort of solve them, that you're somewhat stuck into this world.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
totally.
Maybe we should give just a quick, maybe you should introduce very briefly what is Spiritism, because I know that many...
Yeah, of course.
You know, for people who are listening and kind of wondering, now we're just talking about this idea that it's only really very popular, I guess, in Brazil. But keep it very, very short, of course.
All right. That's a good pitching exercise. Let's pitch Spiritism to the audience. Well, so I'd say Spiritism is
I think what it is for you also.
Okay, what is for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, what is for me is a way to explain the relationship between the soul, so the non-material aspect of our beings, and the bodies, of course. And it's explained in a way that in Spiritism we are considered as beings that would evolve through space and time for eternity. So we would start with a very simple spirit, and that would eventually reincarnate in different kind of shapes in different worlds across the universe. So that's really a vision of you embody something that you need in order to progress, and you would start, I don't know, as a stone, and you would finish eventually as a spirit that would organize planets and whatever, and it can go in very big scales. But the whole link between Spiritism and Catholic Church, for example, is the central piece is Jesus, in a way that for Spiritism, Jesus is sort of the, how we put it, a general or commander of planet Earth. So he would organize the whole biological and, I don't know, physical process of Earth, along with countless number of other beings. Of course, it's never a lonely job. It's always a collective work. And so, so pretty much it's this vision that we experience something in this Earth, and then when we die, we actually go to another city or whatever, and we work on certain issues, and then we come back on Earth or somewhere else in kind of the body of our choice, but it's always a bit more complex than that. But you sort of come back with the setup you need to progress on the new existence, and then you do it kind of, enough. You need to do it as many times as you need to get to a level where you are kind of free from the physical experience, so you don't feel like you have
So do you see it as like, obviously it seems to me it's a progression.
Yeah, totally.
And the progression is going towards a non-material,
exactly.
of not having the need of a material body, of being incarnated in a material body.
The whole point is that the body, this physical world, is actually like the lowest world, or one of the lowest world in terms of density and in terms of experience you can make, and then there are countless worlds.
And so does this relate to you in any way? Maybe this is a tricky question, but last night you mentioned well, I kind of have a list of films I want
Yeah.
to make
Yeah,
that I
totally.
already know.
Yeah.
And does this relate at all to this idea, you know, to this kind of progression that you
kind
want
of.
to?
Yeah, kind of, actually. I got this list that I hope to do in this life.
Maybe you need another incarnation
I
again.
hope not, really. I hope not. I hope to do those films and then do something else. So that maybe we can go back to this duty idea, is that for me, I sort of feel that I need to conclude this part of imagination of myself. It's sort of I have to come to sort of kind of a conclusion within this life to do something else after. I would love to, I don't know, help people to heal, or just be there for people and help them with whatever they need, and other than just making movies. So it's just, yeah.
And don't you see making movies as also doing this? I mean, we were just talking about how movies can create or cannot create feelings of empathy. For example.
Yeah, it can, and I hope to do it as much as possible in that vibe or direction, but it's a detour. I'm willing to, at some point, just go with the shortcut, which is straight helping people without needing one sort of trick. For me, filmmaking is sort of a trick with myself that I found to get out what I have inside, but then when the trick is sort of finished or burned, then I just can do something else.
And what would be the straight-on way?
Well, that's a good question. That's the thing. The straight-on way is, it's actually straight on. So how could I put it? I don't know if you heard of Saint Francis, Italian.
San Francesco.
San Francesco, yeah, of course. And for me, that's the straight way, in a way, and that's very personal. But it's just being there and let yourself be guided by whatever intuition or calling you have.
Do you think that we as humans have this intuition present already? Because I mean, when you think of saints, for example, they're saints, right? We think of them as different a little bit from us, kind of.
Yeah, there's a bit of misconception, I guess, around saints. But it's actually there for everybody. And not that everybody needs it or wants it, but I believe it's there, and whether we jump into it or not. And I say jump, but it's a long jump, because it's not as easy as, okay, I just jump straight into it and then that's it. But I think it's really a way to approach life is, am I at the service of myself or am I at the service of others? And if I'm at the service of others, then of course I need to be at some point at the service of myself. I need to respect myself. I need to take care of myself. So that always is part of the equation. But then if I'm at the service of others, then what do I actually need to do it? And then when I start to ask those questions to myself, then I realize that I don't need much. And now I have way too much than what I actually need. But I also know for a fact in my guts that I need to make those pictures first to get rid of it and be free of it. So yeah, that's the process.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to ask you, how do you see the role of fiction in this idea of empathy that we have been discussing? Because I personally, and this is more maybe a curiosity of mine that I have.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I sometimes have, recently especially, and I don't know why, but I've been having these ideas of, sometimes I watch a movie and I see that their message in fiction, it's so real and so powerful. And when this message is, for example, about the bad nature of humanity, or like, I feel it's so aggressively, like so
Can be
crazy that I'm like, I almost feel like, you know, you leave the cinema and you feel like, I hate this director because like, why did he have to do this?
I know what you mean.
To me, you know, that now I have to think about this stuff. And I just wonder, what do you think about it? Because right now we've been talking a lot about the positive side of this fiction and this making bridges and helping individual and community and being this collective process. But how do you see the bad side of it?
Well, you know, it's funny because it just reminds me of when I went to New Zealand. It was the time that the movie Django Unchained got released, and it was very funny because most of the people were like, "Oh, Django, like the movie," And it was very funny because I didn't like the movie, and
Why didn't you like it?
because it was about revenge, and it was about just getting with force, with strength, what you maybe could have had with other meanings. So yeah, it's just a bloodshed at the end, and it's just really about revenge. And I thought the movie very well directed, and there's nothing about the quality of the movie, but it's really about
The message.
yeah, and I guess how I see things. And so to my name to be associated with a movie that kind of everybody liked, when you talk about Django Unchained, a lot of people liked it, but on the other hand, I was like, that's really, I don't like this association. So about the violence, so about that dimension, this is something that is very present in certain kind of movies, and some directors would address that. And this is something of my life that I've chosen to not look away from, but look through it. So I would always just look over it or through it. I would not let it hit me in a way. So when there are bad news around the world or whatever, I would always try to see, okay, but are there people trying to help those people, or what's being done at the moment for that situation to be overcome? I don't pause.
Like dwell on it.
Yeah, I don't pause at that thing. I don't look those things. I don't stop before those things and start to think about them. I just let them go through, because for me, they are just momentary issues and problems that needs to be addressed. And that's the need, is to be addressed and to be solved in a way. So I'm always more about I try to be about the solving than the problem. I don't look at the problem like, oh, this is a real big problem or whatever. I just
but when those topics are more about sort of essential nature of humans, of how, there is violence, there is killings and wars. And
there is, yeah.
So do you choose not to explore those topics, or?
It's just that I don't mind exploring them, but because of my faith, I believe for humanity or soul to be good, to be connective, to be within a whole, and not to be destructive. And I believe for destruction to be a consequence of many, many things, but I don't believe for it to be the source. So therefore, for me, it's always a consequence. Violence is never a cause, or it's never something so deep. For me, I don't believe for violence to be that deep. For me, it's always sort of kind of a surface. And I'm not saying with that people experiencing violence or whatever, I'm not saying it's not on a deep level, but I'm saying that eventually when you look at things on a pure, spiritual aspect to it, for me, it's a consequence. It's never a cause. So I never sort of stop too much into it. But then, of course, sometimes I explore it. But if I explore it, it's always from bottom to top, So sometimes I start with a very heavy and violent character, but it's always to bring it up to the top, And so that in that perspective, I'm interested. But if it's just to talk about problems or violence and sort of just to make a statement on violence, I'm not interested in that. But that's very personal, of course.
Yeah. I think I agree with you on this, actually. I'm on the same plane of thoughts.
Yeah.
I just feel that, of course, we are so already embedded into those things that to explore it with the purpose of simply restate it again. It's just like repetition, and it's again like this sort of violent repetition.
Yeah.
I could talk for so long still about so many other things, but I think we should keep it nice and short. I think we have already spoken about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Was there anything that came to your mind when I told you about this empathy topic that we had?
Didn't I? It sort of resonated a bit of my day, and I just thought a little bit about it, but it's funny because empathy is really sort of a thing that I actually think a lot about it. So it was a little reminder, and it was nice to see it through this conversation. And it's sort of almost as if a very personal element sort of got away, and I needed to express myself on it, and I never really do it. I never talk about these things. I usually keep it very private.
Wow, it's great. I'm happy that you. Thank you for sharing. Then.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure, and yeah, it's funny because I think today I've said a lot of things that would need, I don't know, maybe would need a lot of context and explanation, but then I don't really care. I mean, that's the things I think. It's just that really usually I never talk about these things because I really try to write it, and the screen I try to embody it, incarnate those ideas in screenplays or projects.
This today, it's another mode, right? I think that's when I'm interested in exploring how this mode works. Like you and I just now are talking, and also with a topic that you just kind of. They're usually really broad topics, so they can be approached by anyone.
Yeah.
But also then you end up sitting with me, who I'm almost a stranger to you, all of a sudden thinking about like empathy and telling me stuff. So I think it's interesting, to also bring, because a lot of people that I talk to actually are not usually also talking in interviews or so it's just like all of a sudden they're having a conversation on a topic. So it's for me super interesting. And so now I guess you can just think for a moment about what you would like other people
the
to
next
discuss.
topic for the next person. I was thinking a little bit about it, and I was just wondering, because I don't know what topics have been addressed already, so
you can try, and then if it has been addressed already, I'll tell you.
I was thinking about hope or guilt, and I don't know if it's been addressed.
None of those?
Okay, then hope. Yeah, hope. That's a good one.
And why?
Because it's funny, because I think in these times where I think we all get to see that a lot of things are moving in a lot of different directions globally. So in this kind of time, then it's funny because now I look at people, I wouldn't say I analyze people, but a little bit, but not in I don't know. I've sort of one way to think about people, and it might sound a little bit strange, but for me it's sort of I wouldn't say defense mechanism, but it's, I don't know. I'll tell you, and then I'll try to explain it. I sort of look at people like, are they hopeful about the future or are they not? And that would be my basic sort of statement about people. And depending on that, I would not interact in the same way. Because if somebody's not hopeful about the future or the present, then there's some things that I wouldn't say, because I don't wanna force anything on anybody. And I wouldn't speak the same way about certain matters. I would, of course, speak my mind if I'm asked to. I would share my vision if they ask me, but I would not approach it in the same way.
I think I can relate to what you just said. I kind of try to stay away from, we call them now the doomers of, how people can really have this approach of, in a way, criticizing like the current state of affairs, but also having, so saying like no hope to even believe that change is possible, that things are actually even still good, like despite all of those things. But then I think at the same time, what is the space of giving them the opportunity to explain themselves? Because I feel that I do it for sure, that I kind of escape them in a way, that I don't have a lot of time for it, or
it's interesting.
It's
interesting.
And how do you, because that's kind of what you're talking about, right? A little bit. As well. And how do you deal with it? Do you feel that you always have an informed opinion on why people won't have hope, for example?
No, sometimes I don't know why they don't have it.
You just feel it.
I just feel it. I just feel it, And I wouldn't, some of my friends, not many, though, but some of them are not very hopeful about the future. For example, they believe that they don't want to make kids because they believe that they fail to see how we can leave them a good world, a healthy world. So they're not, but we share so many other things, basic things that I'm really not, I'm not, it's not a criteria, it's not like whether you have hope for the future and you're my friend, or you don't, and then I don't want to have anything to do with you. It's more like when I'm in a room with people, and then I'm not going to be the same if they got hope for the future or if they don't. I don't even know how to explain it. It's just because for me it's the foundation of who I am, the hopeful, kind of vision. Then I guess if somebody is not, I need to find a way to be authentic, but to know that I need to communicate who I am maybe differently than to somebody who is very hopeful. Then I can just be myself because we share this big foundation, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how it changes things at the beginning, at the very beginning, because hope for the future, in specifically relating to the future, is also this hope in life in general, like life itself, and wanting to, and then this act of creation, whatever creation it might be, then you if you don't have that hope at the beginning, then you stop that act of create. Like, why do you even create anything, like a new idea or a new or whatever it is that you do? I think it's a very nice topic that we're ending this conversation on. Cool. So nice to think, to leave this room sort of thinking of hope and future. I think it's great.
I think it's nice.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you for sharing your personal thoughts on many things. And I'm really looking forward to see your film very soon. And then you can let us know how, if people want to see your work, where they can find you or follow what you're doing.
That's a very good question, because I don't have yet social media structure to share what I do, so it's always very...
But your films they can be seen, right?
So there is one short film, there's two, I guess, that are on YouTube, but then the feature film, we didn't release it yet, and then the other projects are still ongoing, but I guess if somebody wants to share something, they can just write me an email.
Yeah,
I'll be happy to answer. Yeah, I'll be very happy to answer. Maybe it's the best way, straightforward.
I love emails.
Yeah, I like emails too.
They're kind of the old letters, right?
Yeah, they became really the old letters.
And now you really think about even the structure of it. So you sit down and then, it's like really like writing a letter.
Yeah, I like it. And though I communicate a lot with Messenger and Instagram and stuff like that with friends and on topics and for work, but email is always kind of a way to take time. You take time when you write an email. Well, I try.
Thank you for taking the time today. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If you want to dive deeper into the show, don't forget to check the podcast description for extra resources, contact information, and a sign-up form for our newsletter. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, take care.